It's time for another fundamentals video. This time, we'll be covering something that can be a bit tedious, but is a vital skill to know for anyone getting into web design, known as responsive design. This video will be working under the assumption you've already done your CSS styling for a page or site, but if you don't already know how to do that stuff, you can keep this in mind when you do, or just come back to this video later. So first off, what is responsive design? Put simply, responsive design is what lets you have a single site coded in a way that changes its layout based on the device that's viewing it. This is something you've all seen whenever you've changed the size of your browser or turned your tablet or phone while looking at a website. You've noticed, I'm sure, that the content on the page will change depending on what you're viewing it on. Websites and apps both use responsive design, so you can get the best experience from the site or app regardless of how you're looking at it. It lets you see and use a site like, say, YouTube differently if you're viewing it on your phone versus on a TV or a computer monitor. Now, not to get off on a tangent, but there are some pros and cons for both the designer and the client, and it's worth mentioning because there are designers who will look at responsive design as the end-all be-all of any design. Starting with the bad news, coding responsive sites is more complex, takes more time, and requires a lot more testing, especially if you're trying to get it to work the same across all browsers on all devices. There's also the issue that if you're focused on the user experience, mobile devices have different features than a desktop, so they require even more work to make something truly ideal for everyone. On the plus side, when done well, a responsive site gives you only one site to work with, and there's some level of future-proofing for new, smaller devices such as an iWatch, or now we even have fridge monitors. And from a pure business standpoint, it might be more tedious and time-consuming, but that also means more billables for you, the designer, if you have the right business strategy. All that said, there are times where a responsive site's not going to be needed, such as if you're doing an HTML5 mobile app, so it's up to you as the designer, or up to your client's budget, to make the call. That out of the way, how do you actually make a site responsive? First, we need to hop over to our CSS file. For a quick note, CSS gets read top to bottom, so anything you write using a selector will overwrite anything higher with that same selector, which is going to be relevant very soon. So we'll be going all the way to the bottom of our sheet to set up our responsive code. Everything about responsive design uses what are known as a query. A query is made up of code setting the type of media you're changing your styles for, any number of rules to make different versions, and lastly the actual code you're changing and what it's changing to. First comes the media type. We start our query with the @ symbol and the word media. After this, you can type in all, print, screen, or speech. Each of these will make the styles you're applying work only on the specific media type you've set. Print will be for printed materials. This is how you set what people can get if they Command or Control P on your page to print it out, and it's not going to be useful for all sites and apps. Screen, meanwhile, will make your changes apply only to sites and apps being viewed on computer and mobile devices and won't affect the print layout at all. There's also speech, which is meant for screen readers used by the hearing impaired. By default, if you don't have any of these three set, the rules will automatically apply to all, meaning it'll be the same on any device. After those, there are the media features, or a specific feature your code will test for and execute if that feature is found. These go inside of parentheses and are done the same way as any other rule, with the feature, a colon, and the property. There are quite a few of these, starting with width and height. You can set things for specific widths and or heights, but more commonly, you can use the min dash and or the max dash width and or height for your rules. Using these instead lets you pick a range of sizes. Setting a rule for max width 420 pixels, for instance, will mean an iPhone 6s and any smaller devices will be affected. There are also aspect ratio and orientation features, which will let you change code depending on the height to width ratio of a device, or whether a device is tilted portrait or landscape when viewing a site. There are actually over 25 different features you can use, but the 4 I've gone over are the most common, at least that I've seen. If you want to take a look at all of them though, I'll include a link to the Mozilla Foundation's page covering all of them in the description. If you want to use more than one of these rules in your query, such as setting code for just a certain type of tablet, you can do it by using logical operators. This basically means you can add, say, a min-width feature, and after the parentheses on it, add AND before adding a new rule in another set of parentheses. You can add as many of these as you need, depending on how specific you want to get. The last thing you'll need is to make any pages connected to these rules do the actual testing. To do this, we set a meta tag as the first thing under the head tag in any of these pages. This tag is a meta tag with the name being viewport and with the content being the width. For responsive design, it's probably best to make the content width equals device width. If you want to double down and make sure it works how you want, add a comma after that last rule, and still in the content, add initial-scale equals 1, which will make your site the exact aspect ratio of the device. After you have the rules set to test your browser, time to get into the real coding. Set a pair of brackets after the last feature, and just like with any other selector, all of your code will now go between those brackets. The good thing is that even though it can get a bit tedious, very rarely do you actually need to completely redo everything for every different device and screen, and if you do need to do that, that's when it would probably be better to just do 2 sites. Instead, we're just going to overwrite things as they break. This can mean writing 100 lines of code for each query, or it can mean writing 5 to 10 depending on how the site's coded to begin with. So for my example, I started out with a mobile site. I can pretty much guarantee that if this is where you start, things are going to be way too small on bigger screens. So when I scale my browser up, I need to go through and fix what breaks. To do this, add the selector that you want to change. Doing this will, as I said, let you overwrite any styles you've set higher in the style sheet for that selector. You then rewrite any of the rules such as height or overflow in this new rule and set what you're changing it to. When put together, all of this will let you test the size of the screen or browser site's being viewed in, and if it matches the features you've tested for, it will then change any properties you've overwritten to the styles inside of that test. If the browser doesn't match, it'll look to see if there are any other queries you've coded, and either apply those rules if you have, or keep things to the code you originally wrote if you don't. Now, as for the actual sizes to use, unfortunately there's really no standard, or at least there's not a standard set of sizes for truly responsive designs. There are lists of the common sizes of devices, and depending on your budget and time, those could be enough, but if you've made a really complex site, it's unlikely that those standard sizes are going to catch everything. Something breaks out of the container, text won't space the way you want it, or any number of other small annoyances can and often will pop up as you test things. It really depends on how the site's laid out and styled. At least from my experience, it's quickest and most efficient, instead of using those standards as are, to actually use them and then tweak the ranges and add new custom queries as things break, which are what are known as breakpoints. As long as you're not restyling everything all the time, and your client has the budget and timetable for it, this doesn't actually tend to be too bad, and actually ends up reducing the amount of tweaking you'll need to do to get everything optimized no matter how it's viewed. And there is a tool to make things faster. A few, actually. But recently, I've gotten to love the dev tools built into the Safari browser. There's a ton of tools in there that are fantastic for web designers and developers, including the responsive design window. But first, we need to get it working, because by default, it's hidden in Safari. Go into the preferences for Safari, and at the bottom of the Advanced tab, hit the checkbox for Show Develop menu in menu bar. This will let anyone with Safari installed use it. Under the Develop menu, you can then activate the responsive design mode, or press Option-Command-R on a Mac, or Control-Alt-R on a PC. This mode has a number of presets for different browser and device sizes you can test your designs, or any website's designs for that matter. Depending on the kind of site you're working on, you could start on one side of the icons or the other and work your way across, adding queries and rules and refreshing as you go until the site works. You can also click multiple times on those same icons to test for landscape, portrait, and common browser sizes on the various devices, which is where the custom queries tend to come in. And that was responsive design. It can all feel a bit like actual programming switch statements, if you know programming, but with enough practice you eventually get the hang of it, like with anything else. As always, I hope you've all learned something and enjoyed yourself doing it. If you have any questions, thoughts, or other feedback, you can let me know with a comment down below. You can also like this video and share it around, which helps with Google's rankings, and I'm planning to be back here every Friday, so be sure to subscribe for more awesome content. Have a great day, everyone.